Okay, let's try this. I've been struggling with the technical part of things for 10-15 minutes now. YouTube is acting really strange, but I think we got it now. This bad, or the bad part of it is that Anna is almost done with her lunch already. She's been eating vegetable stew with toasted bread, and she's actually been really good. She's getting quite skilled with the spoon. But she's almost done, so we'll see how far we get before she decides lunch is over. So we'll just jump right in to the next part of The Hobbit. Bilbo has been sneaking up to the fire without disturbing anyone, and this is what he saw. Three very large persons sitting around a very large fire of beech logs. They were toasting mutton, one long on long spits of wood, and licking the gravy off their fingers. There was a fine, toothsome smell. Also, there was a barrel of good drink at hand, and they were drinking out of jugs. But they were trolls. Obviously trolls. Even Bilbo, in spite of his sheltered life, could see that. From the great, heavy faces of them, and their size, and the shape of their legs, not to mention their language, which was not drawing-room fashion at all. At all. Mutton yesterday, mutton today, and blimey, if I don't look like mutton again tomorrow, said one of the trolls. Never a blinking bit of man-flesh have we had for long enough, said a second. What the hell, William, was I thinking, off to bring us into these parts at all? Beats me, and the drink running short. What's more, he said, jogging the elbow of William, who was taking a pull at his jug. William choked. Shut your mouth, he said, as soon as he could. Yer can't expect folks to stop here for ever just to be et by you and Bert. You've et a village and a half between yer since we come down from the mountain. How much more do yer want? And time's been up our way. When yer have said, thank yer, Bill, for a nice bit of fat valley mutton like what this is. He took a big bite off a sheep's leg that he was roasting and wiped his lips on his sleeve. I just think from what I read, these trolls should have like an Irish, Scottish accent, but I don't know if that was what Tolkien imagined. But I'm doing my best. Yes, I am afraid trolls do behave like that, even those with only one head each. After hearing all this, Bilbo ought to have done something at once. Either he should have gone back quietly and warned his friends that there were three fair-sized trolls at hand in a nasty mood, quite likely to try roasting dwarves, or even pony, for a change, or else he should have done a bit of good, quick burgling. A really first-class and legendary burglar would at this point have picked the trolls' pockets. It is nearly always worthwhile if you can manage it. Pinched the very mutton off the spits, purloined the beer, and walked off without their noticing him. Others, more practical, but with less professional pride, would perhaps have stuck a dagger into each of them before they observed it. Then the night could have been spent cheerily. Bilbo knew it. He had read a good many things he had never seen or done. He had read of a good many things he had never seen or done. He was very much alarmed, as well as disgusted. He wished himself 100 miles away, and yet somehow he could not go straight back to Thorin and company empty-handed. So he stood and hesitated in the shadows. Of the various burglarious proceedings he had heard of, picking the troll's pockets seemed the least difficult. So at last he crept behind a tree just behind William. Bert and Tom went off to the barrel. William was having another drink. Then Bilbo plucked up courage and put his little hand in William's enormous pocket. There was a purse in it, as big as a bag to Bilbo, Ha, thought he, warming to his new work as he lifted it carefully out. This is a beginning. It was. Trolls' purses are the mischief, and this was no exception. Who are you? It squeaked as it left the pocket, and William turned around at once and grabbed Bilbo by the neck before he could duck behind the tree. Blimey, Bert! Look what I've copped, said William. What is it? Said the other, coming up. Lumme if I know. What are yer? Bilbo Baggins, a hobbit, said poor Bilbo, shaking all over and wondering how to make owl noises before they throttled him. A burrow hobbit, said they, a bit startled. Trolls are slow on the uptake and mighty suspicious about anything new to them. What's a burrow hobbit? Got to do with my pocket, anyways, said Williams. And can yer cook 'em? Said Tom. Yer can try, said Bert, picking up a skewer. He wouldn't make above a mouthful, said William, who had already had a fine supper. Not when he was skinned and boned. Perhaps there are more like him round about, and we might make a pie, said Bert. Here, you! Are there any more of your sort of sneaking in these here woods? Yer nasty little rabbit, said he, looking at the hobbit's furry feet, and he picked him up by the toes and shook him. Yes, lots, said Bilbo, before he remembered not to give his friends away. No, none at all. Not one, he said immediately afterwards. What yer mean, said Bert, holding him right way up by the hair this time. But what I said, said Bilbo, gasping. And please, don't cook me, kind sirs. I am a good cook myself, and cook better than I cook, if you see what I mean. I'll cook beautiful for you, a perfectly beautiful breakfast for you, if only you won't have me for supper. Poor little blighter, said William. He had already had as much supper as he could hold. Also, he had had lots of beer. Poor little blighter, let him go. Not till he says what he means by lots and none at all, said Bert. I don't want to have my throat cut in my sleep. Hold his toes in the fire till he talks. I won't have it, said William. I caught him anyway. You're a fat fool, William, said Bert, as I've said afore this evening. And you're a lout. And I won't take that from you, Bill Huggins, said Bert, and put his fist in William's eye. Then there was a gorgeous row. Bilbo had just enough wits left when Bert dropped him to the ground to scramble out of the way of their feet before they were fighting like dogs and calling one another all sorts of perfectly true and applicable names in very loud voices. Soon, now Anna is picking up her Pyrex bowl thing, and that is a bit alarming. Yeah, I don't want you to dump it all, Anna. Keep eating the way you have. You've been very good. Yeah. Yeah, pick up the spoon. Good. Yeah, out of the way of their feet before they were fighting like dogs, and calling one another all sorts of perfectly true and applicable names in very loud voices. Oh, vill du ha mer apelsinjuice? More orange juice? Yep. Okay. I want to say that word in Norwegian because we're trying to teach her some everyday domestic words that she can use around the house. Apelsinjuice. That's the drink for this lunch. A moment.
Jeez.
Yeah. You lost your spoon, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Alright. Glass is gone. Okay. Soon they were locked in one another's arms and rolling around into the fire, kicking and thumping, while Tom whacked at them both with a branch to bring them to their senses. And that, of course, only made them madder than ever. That would have been the time for Bilbo to have left, but his poor little feet had been very squashed in Berth's big paw, and he had no breath in his body, and his head was going round. So there he lay for a while, panting just outside the circle of firelight. Right in the middle of the fight, up came Balin. The dwarfs had heard noises from the distance, and after waiting for some time for Bilbo to come back, or to hoot like an owl, they started off one by one to creep towards the light as quiet as they could. No sooner did Tom see Balin come into the light than he gave an awful howl. Trolls simply detest the very sight of dwarves, uncooked. Bert and Bill stopped fighting immediately, and, "A sack, Tom, quick," they said. Before Balin, who was wondering where in all this commotion Bilbo was, knew what was happening, a sack was over his head, and he was down. "There's more to come yet," said Tom, "or I'm mighty mistook." "Lots and none at all, it is," said he. "No burrow hobbits, but lots of these here dwarfs. That's about the shape of it." "I reckon you're right," said Bert, "and we'd best get out of the light." And so they did, with sacks on their hands that they used for carrying off mutton and other plunder. They waited in the shadows, as each dwarf came up and looked at the fire and the spilled jugs and the gnawed mutton. In surprise, pop went a nasty smelly sack over their heads, and he was down. Soon Dwalin lay by Balin, and Fili and Kili together, and Dori and Nori and Ori all in the heap, and Oin and Gloin and Beaver and Bofer and Bomber piled uncomfortably near the fire. "That'll teach 'em," said Tom, for Beaver and Bomber had given a lot of trouble and fought like mad, as dwarves will when cornered. Thorin came last, and he was not caught unawares. He came expecting mischief, and didn't need to see his friend's legs sticking out of the sack to tell him that things were not all well. He stood outside in the shadow, some way off, and said, "What's all the trouble? Who has been knocking my people out?" "It's trolls," said Bilbo from behind a tree. They had forgotten all about him. "They're hiding in the bushes with sacks," he said. "Oh, are they?" said Thorin, and he jumped forward to the fire before they could leap on him. He caught up a big branch, all on fire at one side, and Bert got that end in his eye before he could step aside. That put him out of the battle for a bit. Bilbo did his best. He caught hold of Tom's leg as well as he could. It was thick as a young tree trunk, but he was sent spinning up into the top of some bushes when Tom kicked the sparks up in Thorin's face. Tom got the branch in his teeth for that and lost one of his front ones. It made him howl, I can tell you. But just at that moment, William came up behind and popped a sack right over Thorin's head and down to his toes. And so the fight ended. And nicely pickled they were all in now, all neatly tied up in sacks with 3 angry trolls, and 2 with burns and bashes to remember, sitting by them, arguing whether they should roast them slowly or mince them fine and boil them, or just sit on them one by one and squish them into jelly. And Bilbo up in the bush with his clothes and his skin torn, not daring to move for fear they could hear him. It was just then that Gandalf came back, but no one saw him. The trolls had just decided to roast the dwarves now and eat them later. That was Bert's idea, and after a lot of argument, they had all agreed to it. No good roasting them now. It'll take all night, said a voice. Bert thought it was William. Don't start the argument all over again, Bill, he said, or it will take all night. Who's arguing? Said William. Yeah. Skjønner du hva som skjer nå? Ja, Gandalf er her. Gandalf's here. He's making them argue. Who's arguing? Said William. Who thought it was Bert that had spoken? You are, said Bert. You're a liar, said William. And so the argument began. All over again. In the end, they decided to mince them fine and boil them. So they got a great black pot and they took out their knives. No good boiling 'em. We ain't got no water, and it's a long way to the well and all, said a voice. Bert and William thought it was Tom. Shut up, they said, or we'll never get done, and yer can fetch the water yourself if yer say any more. Shut up yourself, said Tom, who thought it was William's voice. Who's arguing but you? I'd like to know. You're a booby, said William. Booby yourself, said Tom. And so the argument began all over again, and went on hotter than ever, until at last they decided to sit on the sacks one by one and squish them and boil them next time. Who shall we sit on first? Said the voice. Better sit on the last fellow first, said Bert, whose eyes had been damaged by Thorin. He thought Tom was talking. Don't talk to yourself, said Tom. But if you want to sit on the last one, sit on him. Which is he? The one with the yellow stockings, said Bert. Nonsense, the one with the grey stockings, said a voice like William's. I made sure it was yellow, said Bert. Yellow it is, said William. Then what did you say was grey for? Said Bert. I never did, Tom said. That I never did, said Tom. It was you. 2-1, so shut your mouth, said Bert. Who are you talking to? Said William. Now stop it, said Tom and Bert together. The night's getting on and dawn's coming early. Let's get on with it. Dawn take you all and be stoned to you, said a voice that sounded like William's, but it wasn't. For just at that moment a light came over the hill, and there was a mighty twitter in the branches. William never spoke, for he stood turned to stone as he stooped, and Bert and Tom were stuck like rocks as they looked at him. And there they stand to this day, all alone, unless the birds perch on them. For trolls, as you probably know, must be underground before dawn, or they go back to the stuff of the mountain they are made of and never move again. That is what had happened to Bert and Tom and William. Excellent, said Gandalf, as he stepped from behind a tree and helped Bilbo to climb down from the thorn bush. Then Bilbo understood. It was the wizard's voice that had kept the trolls bickering and quarreling until a light came and made an end of them. The next thing was to untie the sacks and let out the dwarves. They were nearly suffocated and very annoyed. They had not at all enjoyed laying and listening to the trolls making plans for roasting them and squishing them and mincing them, but had to hear Bilbo's account of what had happened to him twice over before they were satisfied. Silly time to go practicing pinching and pocket picking, said Bomber, when what we wanted was food and fire. And that's just what you wouldn't have got of those fellows without a struggle in any case, said Gandalf. Anyhow, you're wasting time now. Don't you realize that the trolls must have a cave in a hole dug somewhere near to hide from the sun in? We must look into it. They searched about and soon found the marks of trolls, stony boots, going away through the trees. They followed the track up the hill until, hidden by bushes, they came to a big door of stone leading to a cave. But they could not open it. Not though they all pushed while Gandalf tried various incantations. Would this be any good? Said Bilbo, when they were getting tired and hungry. I found it on the ground where the trolls had their fight." He held out a largish key, though no doubt William had thought it very small and secret. It must have fallen out of his pocket, very luckily, before he was turned to stone. "Why on earth didn't you mention it before?" they cried. Gandalf grabbed it, fitted it into the keyhole. Then the stone door swung back with one big push. And they... Oi, oi, oi. All right, that's enough food dumping in it. Yep. We're almost at the end here. We'll try to finish this chapter. So please try not to make too much of a mess. Yeah, it swung back with one big push, and they all went inside. There were bones on the floor, and a nasty smell was in the air. But there was a good deal of food, jumble, careless... Nanner! Putting her plate on her head like a hat. Yeah, don't do that. Yeah, food jumbled carelessly on shelves and on the ground among an untidy litter of plunder, and all sorts of brass buttons and pots full of gold coins standing in the corner. There were lots of clothes, too, hanging on the walls, too small for trolls. I am afraid they belonged to victims, and among them were several swords of various makings, shapes, and sizes. Two caught their eyes particularly, because of their beautiful scabbards and jeweled hilts. Gandalf and Thorin each took one of these, and Bilbo took a knife in a leather sheath. It would have made only a tiny pocket knife for a troll, but it was as good as a short sword for a hobbit. "These look like good blades," said the wizard, half drawing them and looking at them curiously. Don't do that, Anna. Okay. Yeah, you're certainly done with lunch. Yeah, these are good blades, said the wizard. They were not made by any trolls, nor by any smith among men in these parts and days. But when we can read the runes on them, we shall know more about them. "Let's get out of this horrible smell," said Keely. So they carried out the pots of coin and such food as was untouched and looked fit to eat, also one barrel of ale which was still full. By that time they felt like breakfast, and being very hungry, they did not turn their noses up at what they had gotten from the troll's larder. Their own provisions were very scanty. Now they had bread and cheese and plenty of ale, and bacon to toast in the embers of the fire. After that they slept, for their night had been disturbed, and they did nothing more till the afternoon. Then they brought up the ponies, and carried away the pots of gold, and buried them very secretly not far from the track by the river, putting a great many spells over them, just in case they ever had the chance to come back and recover them. When that was done, they all mounted once more, and jogged along again on the path towards the east. "Where did you go to, if I may ask?" said Thorin to Gandalf, as they rode along. "To look ahead," said he. "And what brought you back in the nick of time?" "Looking behind," said he. "Exactly," said Thorin. "But could you be more plain?" "I went on to spy out our road. It will soon become dangerous and difficult. Also, I was anxious about replenishing our small stock of provisions. I had not gone very far, however, when I met a couple of friends of mine from Rivendell." "Where's that?" asked Bilbo. "Don't interrupt," said Gandalf. "You will get there in a few days now, if you're lucky, and find out all about it. As I was saying, I met two of Elrond's people. They were hurrying along for fear of the trolls." Almost done, Anna. Just a few more lines. It was they who took me that three of them had come down, who told me that three of them had come down from the mountains and settled in the woods not far from the road. They had frightened everyone away from the district, and they waylaid strangers. I immediately had a feeling that I was wanted back. Looking behind, I saw a fire in the distance and made for it. So now you know. Please be more careful next time, as we shall never get anywhere. Thank you, said Thorin. That was that. Chapter 2. It was a long read today. And you have been fairly good, but you still need a shower. So, do you want to say bye-bye?
Bye-bye.